Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Hope you are all fine. Today I think it's our lecture number 14, and in today's lecture we will discuss some important issues related to performance management. The title of our course is Performance and Compensation Management. So in most of the classes we discussed about the compensation management. In today's class we will discuss the different components of performance. Now, performance, is very important with respect to any organization, and there are the different dimensions of performance. Performance is actually a concept which may have the different dimensions according to the industry or according to the organizations. In today's lecture, we will discuss some important dimensions of the performance, that is competitiveness, the most important dimension of performance, productivity, and technological innovation. We have already discussed productivity in our some of the previous lectures. We will just briefly discuss the concept of productivity again, and then in the end of this session we will discuss the Pakistani scenario, that how important these measures of performance are for the Pakistani industry. So we will discuss the issues in the Pakistani industry and how we can be competitive and productive and in order to be competitive in the global market especially. So this is our topic for today's lecture. This is the outline of today's lecture. We will discuss and define the competitiveness. We will discuss the dimensions of competitiveness, indicators of competitiveness, then the relationship between productivity and competitiveness. Then we will define technological innovation, and then we will discuss the Pakistani scenario throughout this lecture. Now let's define competitiveness. Competitiveness is the process by which one entity strives to perform another. So whenever an organization do something different with respect to their competitors, and in order to outperform their competitors, then this process is known as competitiveness. The allocation of resources to obtain the organization's long-term objectives in the most efficient, effective way. So if competitiveness plays a very important role in order to achieve the competitive advantage for the organization. Competitiveness basically depends on many things, and most importantly, competitiveness also depends on productivity. So competitiveness and productivity are interrelated with each other, and both of these measures of performance help us to achieve the long-term objectives and goals of the organization. And of course, we are always interested to achieve these objectives with the minimum resources through the optimum allocation of resources and in the most efficient and effective way. So this is generally how we can define the competitiveness. There can be the different dimensions of competitiveness. As I discussed earlier, that it is the characteristic through which an organization outperforms the other organization. So there are the different ways through which the organization outperform the different other organizations or their competitors. And among all of these factors, the sum of the important factors are, you can see on the screen. The first one is the differentiation. Differentiation is very important for any organization, and differentiation again helps us to gain the competitive advantage for the organization. Whenever an organization wants to have the competitive edge over the competitors, they want always to differentiate their products and services so that the customers can have the new dimensions of products and services. So this is the way, or this is the through this differentiation process we can outperform the competitors. Then of course flexibility plays a very important role, and it is again important dimension of competitiveness. Flexibility, for example, we have already discussed about the business processes in BPR lecture, and in that particular lecture we discussed about the business processes, that these should be flexible. There should not be rigidity in those business processes. So when an organization is dynamic and their managers are also dynamic, then there is a sort of culture in the organization which promotes flexibility, and there is flexible environment in the organization, and through this flexibility you can perform well, and in that sense managers and the workers play an important role to produce the products, to make the innovations, and to outperform their competitors. So flexibility is another important dimension of competitiveness. Similarly, quality plays a very important role. We produce the products as the organization. We produce the products and services for our customers. So how we define the quality? That the quality is meeting or exceeding the customer satisfaction. So in order to achieve that satisfaction, we will have to maintain a particular quality of the products and services. And again, this quality plays a very important role towards achieving the competitiveness. Similarly, price plays a very important role, especially for the customers who are price conscious, and especially in the developing countries like Pakistan, the price of the products and services which is being offered by the organizations, that of course plays a very important role, not only in Pakistan but across the globe. We every organization, every industry wants to be cost effective, and to offer their products and services at the affordable prices, so they can compete not only in the domestic industry but also in the global industry. Time again is a very important factor. Today is the time of not the economy of scale but the economy of time. All the organizations focus on the economy of time. Economy of time means we want to deliver the products and services in the less time, as compared to the competitors. So technology plays a very important role in that economy of time. And if you see the different industries, every industry, every organization wants to serve their customers speedily. So that speed and that pace of time and that economy of time also plays a very important role for any organization to be competitive in the market. And again, that is the dimension of the competitiveness. So all these, and there are many other dimensions. We just discussed some of the important dimensions of competitiveness, and these are the dimensions on which the managers and the workers should focus in order to make their organizations competitive. And this is how the organizations compete against each other, and they're always used to have a sort of competition on improving the dimensions of competitiveness, as we just discussed. Let's discuss about the indicators of competitiveness. Productivity is the efficiency and effectiveness with which goods and services are produced and provided. And we have already discussed that one of the way to define the productivity is the ratio of the output to the input. So whenever we are going to produce the goods and services efficiently and effectively, it means we are productive. Innovation involves the creation of products, services, or the processes that is new to an organization. There are the different types of innovation. They can be the product innovation, they can be the process innovation, there can be the incremental innovation. Like in the concept like TQM, we are always interested in the incremental innovation, in which we are interested, 5 to 10% of the improvement. There can also be the radical innovation, in which we want to radically change our products as well as our services. So in today's lecture, we are discussing the competitiveness with respect to the technological innovation. And technology plays a very important role in order to be competitive in the market. And in the today's environment, technology, that is the technological environment that is becoming that is changing with so rapidly, that the organization will have to be very vigilant about this technology, and they will have to modify their products, modify their services with every technology which is coming in the market. So due to the pace of technology and due to the pace of improvements and changes in the technology, the organizations will have to focus on the factor that they will have to adopt this technology immediately, so they can have the competitive advantage over their competitors. So most important dimensions or indicators how we can have the idea that we are competitiveness, that is the productivity, innovation, and technological innovation. If these three perspectives are good in the organization, it means that will be the indication that the organization is competitive. Okay, class, please note down the question. You will have to answer the question in the comments session. Just mention the different dimensions of the competitiveness, dimensions, and also the indicators of competitiveness. What are the indicators and dimensions of competitiveness? So please reply this question in the comment session, so that we can have the idea, I can have the idea that you are attending the lecture and you are attentive. New competitiveness paradigm. Changes in the competitiveness focus all over the world, from product competitiveness to the process competitiveness. Now that is very important. We have already discussed about the process improvement in the lecture which was titled as business process reengineering. And again, in this slide you can see that all the organizations are changing their focus from the product competitiveness to the process competitiveness. This process becomes so important, and whether these are the administrative processes or the technological processes or whatever the processes are there in the organization, we need to be competitive in all of these processes. So the world has just focused their intention from the product competitiveness to the process competitiveness, from process competitiveness to the structure or the society competitiveness, from the process competitiveness to the structure or society competitiveness. Now, process competitiveness may lead to the structure competitiveness, as we discussed in the BPR lecture, that if we want to implement the business process change in the organization, so we'll have to sometimes modify the structure of the organization, at least for that particular processes. And all of these processes are so important that that may lead to the society competitiveness. And that is the gray area in which Pakistan will have to improve. As I discussed earlier in the very much intention and most of the lectures, that this process change is imperative for all the Pakistani organizations, because in most of the organizations, especially in the public sector organizations, all of these processes, procedures, rules, policies are so old and they are not competitive in any way. So that's why if Pakistani industry want to be competitive and want to compete in the global market, they will have to focus their from product competitiveness to the process competitiveness. Now, competitive advantage, edge over the competitors. We have already discussed again the process and the human resource are the two important sources of competitive advantage. Process also plays a very important role in the competitive advantage, and this process focus helps the organizations to achieve the competitiveness. Now, types of competitive advantage a nation's companies enjoy must shift from comparative advantage to the competitive advantage. Now, there is a difference between comparative advantage or the competitive to the competitive advantage. That is, a comparative advantage means if any company has any advantage due to cost of labor or due to the natural resources or due to the ideal location of the company, then that advantage will be taken as the comparative advantage. Whereas the competitive advantage may be any advantage due to uh, due to any product or the unique services uh, which the competitors are not being offering. So again, I am telling you the difference between the comparative advantage and the competitive advantage. Any advantage of the company due to the cost labor, natural resources, location of the company or something else, that will be termed as comparative advantage. Whereas competitive advantage is any advantage which gives a company advantage over the competitors. So this is a way we can differentiate between comparative advantage and the competitive advantage. And again, the focus of most of the companies have diverted from the comparative advantage to the competitive advantage. And these days, all the companies desire to have the competitive advantage. So they are always interested to produce the unique products and services and to follow the unique processes so they can have the edge over the competitors. Low competitiveness drawbacks. Let's discuss some of the drawbacks of low competitiveness. Lack of competitiveness leads to the reducing sales. Of course, the sale will be reduced if you are not competitive, and your customers and your market will shift towards the competitors who are offering the most competitive products. Stagnation in the business, that will your sale will be declining, and so you will be stagnant and they will not be you may not be profitable anymore. Underutilization of capacities and low productivity, and all of these things will be leading to the lower productivity and the underutilization of the different resources in the organization. So these are some of the drawbacks of low competitiveness. Competitiveness is the continually sustained increase in productivity resulting in higher wages and living standards. Now, this is another definition of competitiveness, and in this definition, the competitiveness is linked with the productivity, and it is also linked with the living standards. So, when we discuss the competitiveness at the macro level, not in the at the organizational level or the micro level, it is directly linked with the living standards of the of any country. So competitiveness continually sustained increase in productivity resulting in higher wages and living standards characterized by increasing export market shares. So if you're competitive and your country industries is competitive, of course it will be helpful for the country to export their products and services outside the country. Competitiveness demonstrated by ability to meet rest of free international markets while expanding the real income. So competitiveness helps to meet the requirements of the international markets, and in that sense it will be helpful to expand the real income of the country. So it is beneficial, it is helpful to improve the living standards of the citizens as well of the whole country. So that's why this is important to focus on the competitiveness. Not only it is helpful for the organizations, but it is also helpful for the country, you know. So types of competitive advantages a nation's companies enjoy must shift from competitive advantage to the competitive advantage due to the unique products and services. I think we have already discussed in this slide. Degree to which a nation can, under free and fair market conditions, produce good training or expanding the real income of its citizens. So it is the competitiveness which helps the organizations to be competitive in the market, and in that way, as I told you earlier, through the better training and through the fair market conditions, and uh, by using the market conditions, you can expand the real income of its citizens. So competitiveness is not only important for the individual organizations, but it is also important at the macro level for the organizations, for the country as a whole. So indicators of the competitiveness at the macro level. Competitiveness of nations reflects the standards of living of their citizens. So whenever we discuss the competitiveness, it can be discussed at the different levels, at the organizational level, at the national level, as well as at the macro level. So at the when we discuss the competitiveness at the macro level, the competitiveness of nations reflects the standards of living of the nation, that is directly linked with the living standards of the citizens of the country. And the national competitiveness, it is the consolidation of micro level performances of companies and individual, two agents of the economic growth. So as I told you earlier, there are the different levels of the performance and the dimensions of the performance. Of course, if the organizations and industries are competitive, that will lead to the national competitiveness. And it is important to focus on the industry competitiveness and the organizational competitiveness to achieve the benchmarks of that national competitiveness. And these are actually the two agents of economic growth, and these are the indicators through which you have the idea that your country is economically growing. Now, how we can have the idea that standard of living of the citizens are being improving? There are the two important indicators, which are the gross domestic product and the gross national product, economic measures of the amount of wealth created in the country. So whenever your GDP and GNP is improving, it means you are more competitive and the standard of living is being increased. And the direct relation of GDP and GNP is to the competitiveness. If your competitiveness, if your industry is competitiveness, that will be helpful to increase the gross domestic product and the gross and national product. This wealth is passed to the citizens and reflected in their standard of living. Country's competitiveness is determined on the basis of citizens' standard of living as defined by the GDP per person. So is in that sense, the competitiveness is directly linked with the overall economic growth of the country. And what I want to discuss through these slides, there are the different levels at which we'll have to discuss about the competitiveness. One is the organizational level, the other one is the industry level competitiveness, The next one is the country's level competitiveness. So all these levels of the competitiveness are interlinked with each other, and it is very necessary for any country to focus on all of these levels of competitiveness, so that their standard of living of the citizens may be enhanced. So in any of the free market economy, in the capitalist economy, the ultimate objective is to improve the standard of living, as I discussed earlier. Central indicator of national competitiveness. This is the standard indicator of national competitiveness. If the standard of living of the citizens is improved, it means that is more competitive as compared to the other nations. Index measures standard of living as GDP per capita, tracks long-term and latest year growth in standard of living levels using the PPP. Now these are the different definitions which can be helpful in the improvement of the competitiveness. As I told you earlier, that competitiveness is directly linked with the productivity. So standard of living is determined by the productivity of our nation's economy, which is measured by the value of goods and services produced per unit of the nation's human capital and natural measures. As I discussed earlier, that competitiveness, productivity, innovation, all these things are interlinked with each other. And as I told you earlier, that standard of living is important for the competitiveness. In the same way, standard of living is also determined by the productivity of that nation's economy. That is, what is the value of the goods and services which are being produced in that particular country. So all these are the different indicators of standard of living within any country. Productivity is the efficiency with which the goods and services are produced and provided. It is determined by previous investments and by the quality and performance of workforce, technological innovation, quality of plant and equipment, and effectiveness with which these factors of production are utilized. So, as far as the productivity is concerned, efficiency and effectiveness are the two important indicators of productivity. Effectiveness, that is linked with the output of the of your products and services, or the quality of the products and services. And the efficiency is directly linked with the resources, that how better you have utilized the resources for the production. So you will have to be competitive both in with respect to the resources as well as with respect to the quality of output, and then we can have the idea that the organization is productive. So productivity is both determinant and indicator of the national competitiveness. So you see that how all of these things are interlinked with each other. That is the productivity, innovation, competitiveness, industry competitiveness, and organizational competitiveness towards the national competitiveness. So all these things are interrelated, interconnected with each other. Whenever we want to increase the standard of living of the citizens, the government should focus on all of these perspectives, that is the productivity, innovation, and competitiveness. Productivity is in a nation is a reflection of what both domestic and foreign firms choose to do in that particular location. Location of ownership is secondary for the national prosperity. Productivity of local industries is of fundamental importance to the competitiveness. So in that sense, productivity is directly linked with the competitiveness. If you want to increase the competitiveness of the industry, you will have to focus on the productivity, you will have to focus on the technological innovation. So both productivity and technological innovation again plays a very important role towards the national competitiveness. Now, this competitiveness also depends on sophistication with which companies compete and quality of microeconomic business environment. Now, again, there is also the environment which is important, which should also be, scanned and discussed whenever we talk about the competitiveness. Competitiveness is also dependent on the quality of the microeconomic indicators within any country. If the microeconomic indicators are poor in any country, then it will be difficult for the industry and any organization to be competitive, and especially if they want to compete their company in the international market, in the global market. So it whenever you want to be competitive, it is necessary to scan the environment in which you are working. It is very important. So at the national level, the government should focus on improving the overall microeconomic business environment so that the industry can be more competitive, especially in the international market. Indicators of competitiveness, we've already discussed different indicators of competitiveness. Investment is another important indicator. You'll have to invest if you want to be competitive, because for any technological innovation and for the productivity improvement, you'll need the investment. Okay? Investment in the products and services, investment in the human being as well. So fundamental building block of current and future economic activity and competitiveness pyramid is investment. Fundamental determinant of national competitiveness, hard assets, that is the private sector expenditure on factories and equipment. Hard assets mean machinery, equipment, infrastructure, all that is important to be competitive for any organization. Then soft assets like public and private sector spending on R&D, public sector, their human resource, their education. So at the national level, both of these hard assets as well as the soft assets are important, on which there should be the thorough investment. Nawaz, worry, let's break for 5 minutes. So trade is another important of competitiveness. Exports dependent on national rates of productivity and national levels of investment in products and processes of the production. So it is very important that how much your country is investing in the products and services, and at the national level also. So national level productivity helps us to to export their products, and so in that sense trade is also important indicator of competitiveness. Growth rates and levels of export, significant indicator of national competitiveness. Useful indices: growth in exports of manufactured products, merchandise, goods and services, trade balances, exchange rates and their impact on growth of exports. So all of these economic indicators are the important indications of the competitiveness. if your trade or balance is improving, your overall GDP is improving, GNP, gross domestic product is improving, it means you are going towards more competitiveness, and the organization or the country is moving towards the competitiveness. So in order to be competitive, all of these indicators should always be kept in mind. Now, this competitiveness is very much important in the post, WTO scenario, especially in Pakistan. The post WTO scenario is not only important for the Pakistan but for every nations, and it was very much clear after that WTO that you will have to be competitive if you want to compete in the international market. So World Trade Organization agreements and regional territories, these are forcing Pakistani domestic market to open up many activities besides the many traditional domestic sectors such as hospitals and food supermarket chains, which are changing the life of the local stores. So after the WTO, Pakistan domestic market is opening up. It was very important, in the post WTO scenario, that you'll have to expand your industry, and you should invest in those areas so that you can be more competitive in the international market. Quota restrictions are over by 2004. No quantitative restrictions, requiring us to be more productive. So after the post WTO scenario, it is very important for every nation, for every country, that you'll have to be productive, you'll have to be competitive, because now there is the whole world is the open market. You can go anywhere, you can produce anywhere, and but only those organizations may compete in that post WTO scenario who may be productive, who may be competitive, and this is taken as a very good opportunity by most of the nations. Let's take the example of Pakistan. uh, Before the WTO implementation, or pre-WTO scenario, we were having the sufficient share in the textile market. But after WTO, the Bangladesh market improved their products, and also make them more cost effective. So they capture most of the international share, especially from Pakistani share decreased because they were not so competitive and cost effective anymore. Similarly, the quality was not improved competitively. So, in the post WTO scenario, it is very important for any company to be competitive and productive. Now, again, as I discussed earlier, that unfortunately we were not prepared for the post WTO scenario, and the government did not focus and did not give proper attention to their industries, especially in the post WTO scenario. Successive governments in Pakistan least interested in investing in education, health, and I'm telling you that these education, health are the most important sectors of economy on which we should focus if we want to be competitive. But you can, if you see the different budgets of Pakistan in the last decade, you will be surprised, and it is shocking that how less we are expanding on these most important sectors, that is education and health. Similarly, human capital, infrastructure, the government of Pakistan rarely invest in these important sectors. So that was one of the way our economic growth was continued to be declining in the last decade, thereby weakening Pakistan's competitiveness to fight the emerging challenges in post WTO scenario. So that was the basic reason Pakistan was lacking with respect to the other countries, especially at the same level like Bangladesh and the other economies. We are far behind uh, with respect to these economies. Now, central characteristics in contemporary era of global economies after the post WTO scenario, uh, the different economies, the global economies focused on important things in order to be competitive in the market. Intensified global competition and the emergence of new centers of production. That was again very important after the post WTO scenario. An exceptionally innovative technological environment. Now, um, we discuss the technological environment in two ways. One is the with respect to the country, as the other one is the world technological environment. So again, there are a lot of innovations in the technological environment in the last decade, and that just changed the pace of competition everywhere. Proliferation, spread and restructuring of MNCs, MNCs, मल्टीनेशनल कंपनीज का जो स्ट्रक्चर चेंज हो गया, एक्सपेंड उन्होंने ऑल ओवर द ग्लोब उसको एक्सपेंड किया, अपने प्रोसेसेस को उन्होंने री इंजीनियर किया. सो ऑल ऑफ दीज फैक्टर्स प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल in the development of these important companies. A diversified global financial system जो था उस पर लोगों ने फोकस किया. Important changes in the states role in domestic and global economic affairs. तो वो जो एक कंपटीशन का जो स्टाइल था वो बिल्कुल चेंज हो गया इन द लास्ट डिकेड ड्यू टू द टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशन, ड्यू टू द पोस्ट WTO सिनारियो. एक ओपन मार्केट हो गई पूरी की पूरी ग्लोब फॉर ऑल दी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. लेकिन जिन लोगों ने इसको फोकस किया उन्होंने मार्केट को कैप्चर किया, ग्लोबल मार्केट को कैप्चर किया. बट दी कंट्रीज़ लाइक पाकिस्तान और दी अदर डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज़ उन्होंने फोकस नहीं किया इनोवेशन, टेक्नोलॉजिकल इनोवेशन पे फोकस नहीं किया, एजुकेशन पर उन्होंने इन्वेस्ट नहीं किया. तो वो they were far behind as compared to the other developed economies. Okay, let's have 15 minutes break. After the 15 minutes, I will start next session.